Yep.
Cool.
Quality's not brilliant, but we can read it.
Well, put your glasses on, Phil. Okay, so here's our plugin. It has a few extra features and options that you can use. It allows you to turn off the data layer, which I'll get into in a minute. You can change the name. You can track user logins. You can track administrator activity, and you can turn on scroll tracking, which allows you to track how far a user will go down through your content. Basically allow you, for example, if you had a page that visitors were landing on, which had a lot of information, was a key page for you, say for example it came from an advert or AdWord display, you could track the activity of users as they scroll down the page. So if a lot of the users got down to something like 25% and then bounced off the page, you'd know you're not providing the right content for them. Whereas if a lot of the users that jumped on the page went to 100% and then left, even though your bounce rate was quite high, you would be able to determine that you were providing the right information because people were going all the way down the page, reading through all of your content. And so the fact that they'd got all of what they needed on the first page wouldn't necessarily mean that the bounce rate being high was a bad thing. So it just gives you a little bit of extra insight into user behavior on your site. So the main configuration element here is for the container ID. So to get your container ID, you need to go to Google Tag Manager, which you can find at tagmanager.google.com. Put that in there.
Got it, but first you'll need to unlock your phone.
Shush.
So those that are new to Joomla and need to know that Gary's personal assistant.
That was my personal assistant on the mobile. Put that over there. So here's my Tag Manager account that I've set up on my alter ego account, which is Winchy. If you go into the create account, let's set up this testing account. It's website and it's web. And it's test.barclayworks.com. Create. I'll accept that. And what should happen is I should be given a pop-up window with the two parts of the Tag Manager code that you need to install on your website. Now, the plugin that we're using is going to do this for us, and it's going to do it in quite a smart way, which if you were trying to do this on your own, you can insert this code into templates and that kind of thing. There are some templates that offer you the fields for Tag Manager, but very often they get the placement of the actual tags wrong in the head or on the body. So for this situation, I would rather just rely on my plugin. But what we do need is the actual tag. So if we go to admin, there's our tag for this site. We just add that in there, save and close, and then enable the Tag Manager plugin. And then if we look at our new page and maybe look at the source, we can see that the very first thing after the opening head tag is our Tag Manager code. And again here, straight after the body, here's our no script fallback code. And again, the reason why this is better off here rather than just before the closing head is because it means that Tag Manager is loaded before all of this JavaScript, which allows you to track some of the activities that are going on through that JavaScript. So what we have now is we have a Tag Manager plugin running on the website. We have a container that is connected to our Tag Manager, but we've got nothing sending the content or information through to analytics. So even if I browse the site, if I did page loads or anything, there's going to be no information sent over to analytics at all. So the first thing we have to do in Tag Manager is set up our basic page view tag. So to set up a tag, you simply go to Tags, Start New, set up a tag, and you have a whole range of different tags that you can actually install on your site. So for example, we've got Google Analytics, Universal Analytics. If you're building an app, then you might use the app and web configuration. If you've got Google Ads, you might set up a different kind of tag, which is a conversion tracking tag. So, you know, as you start to get into using Tag Manager, you suddenly see just how much you can integrate your website into your overall marketing activities. For this case, it's simple Google Analytics tag, and we're going to track type page view. So basically we're going to track all of the page views to our site. So we want it to trigger on every page. So now that we've got our analytics tag set up, we need a trigger. And we're basically just going to pick our page view all pages. Now, one of the settings here in the tag configuration, just make it just mute Nathan while he's playing around with his.
Yeah, Nathan, you got.
So the one thing that we have to do with this the Google Analytics tag is that we have to pass in our Google Analytics code. So we now have to set up Google Analytics. Actually, I've already set it up, I think, so that we can get our Google Analytics tag code. So this is our Google Analytics page. If I go through here to our testing, what we need here is the Google Analytics tracking ID. So to get that, go into admin, property settings, and pick up this key ID here. Take that to Tag Manager. Now I'm going to do it hard-coded to begin with, but there is actually several reasons why you wouldn't want to do this. I'm going to put the tracking ID in here for now, but we'll come back to that in a minute. And we'll save this. Naming conventions on Tag Manager is something that you really want to get your head around very quickly, because once you start to use it, you very quickly build up a lot of tags, you build up a lot of variables, you build up a lot of triggers. So you really want to be quite clear in the items that you're in the naming convention that you're using for each of these different elements. There are new ways of organizing that in Tag Manager now using folders, but for me, I've always gone with something like Google Analytics event page view, something like that, just to let me know what is actually going on with that tag. So what we've done now is we've kind of closed the loop. We've got a Tag Manager code on our website which points over to Tag Manager. We've got a tag manager event, which is our page view, which is firing on all pages. And that is now using the Google Analytics tracking ID in order to target all of the activities that are going on the page through to Google Analytics. If that was all you wanted to do, you're done, pretty much. We should now be getting Google Analytics tracking information on the website. Maybe one way we can look at that is by going into real time, doing an overview, refreshing the page. And seeing if we've got any activity coming through. And no, I'm not seeing anything. So one of the things we can do now is we can start to work out why things aren't working. And one of the great things about Tag Manager is that it allows you to preview your activity using the preview slider on your page. So if we go back now to Tag Manager, close this, do a refresh, what we find now is that we have Tag Manager preview window showing up and letting us know what is actually going on in terms of Tag Manager and the pipeline between the website and analytics, and allows us to see what's going on. So we are actually getting a Google Analytics event page view tag being fired. The information that it's sending is going through to our tracking ID, and it is firing successfully. So although we're not seeing anything here, there we go. So in real time now we're actually picking up tracking information from our site. So that's the basics of it. One of the things that you realize very quickly when you start using analytics is that with all the data and information that's coming through, you really want to create some you want to the data that you're getting is the most important thing, and you want to make sure that it's as clean as possible and accurate as possible. So one of the things that you do very quickly is kind of considered best practice is in your analytics on testing, you can see here that we've got the properties and apps, and then we've got this thing over here called views. So if we click on here, we've got an all website data view, and that's actually what we're using to view the analytics coming through on the site. In order to take the next step in analytics, you want to create 3 different views. And the reason why you want to do that is because, first of all, you want to be able to filter out some of the information that's coming through to analytics because it's inaccurate. Sometimes people will be using advanced analytics spamming techniques to insert rogue information into your account. To this day I can't work out why they want to do that, but they do. You might also be getting referral information from sites. Let's say, for example, you have a website that links to a shop that isn't on the same domain. So you might have referral information that you want to cross-site information that you want to set up correctly so that you're not getting referrals coming from the wrong place. You might want to filter out all the activities of yourself or your office. So what you want to do is create a view which is a main view which includes all those filters. You then create a view which is the raw, or you use the raw data view so that anything that's coming in you've got a fallback to, and then you create a testing view which allows you to make any changes, look at the information that's being changed by your filters, by your configurations, and see that it's actually working properly. So I'll do that very quickly. We're going to do 3 different views. This is our testing view. We're not in the United States. Let's just pick up the typo. This will be our main view. If anybody has any questions, by the way, just feel free to drop them in. So now we have our three views. I'm just going to call this raw data. Okay, so there's a couple of configuration things that you might be looking at here and thinking, I wonder what they're used for. In the default page, I've seen people adding in like an index.php in here. You really don't want to do that, because basically anything that you add into the default page as an entry gets added to all of your pages, all of the page information that comes through the channel. So this is kind of adding on index.php at the end of every link, which you don't want to do. So you just want to leave this as is. You do want to make sure that your website's URL is using the correct scheme, and if you are using e-commerce, then you do definitely want to use the right currency, which is obviously GBP. Okay, so going back to Tag Manager now that we've got everything set up, one of the things that I did want to show you, which is quite useful, is the use of a variable. And what we can do here is we can dynamically add in the analytics tracking ID into Google Tag Manager. So the way we do that is we add a new variable, and it's a constant variable, and we can add our container ID in here. Again, using a naming convention. So now that we have our variable in our tag, what we can do is, rather than using this hard-coded tracking ID, we can set up Tag Manager to use our variable. So here's our variable, we add that in, take the tracking ID out, and so now the reason why that works really well is that for example, if you want to create other tags, for example event-based tags, rather than having to hard code in your tracking ID, you basically pull in the variable. Why that's really useful is that when you export all of your tags, maybe to move on to another site, you can then simply change the variable without having to change any of the configuration of the tags that you've pre-configured. What what Tag Manager has done recently is they've gone a step further, and what they allow you to do now is to actually set up a variable which is a Google Analytics settings variable. So why this is important is it allows you to configure the actual tracking code and any other configurations that you might need. For example, extra dimensions for your analytics, advanced, enhanced e-commerce, cross-site tracking, all of those kind of things can all be configured in one variable and pass through all of your different events and tags. So the way you do that is very similar to setting up a standard variable. Go in here and we go to Google Analytics settings. This allows us to add our tracking ID and then also add any other configurations like this to that variable, which then gets pulled in across all of the analytics settings that you've got set up for all of your tags and all of your triggers. So it's a very, very clever way of being able to set advanced settings and reuse them again and again with all the tags that you're using on the site. So the way you use that is change the name, GA settings. And again we go back to our tag. And this time we just basically select our variable settings here, and everything else is done for us. So what that allows us to do is simply basically set up a base setting, and then if we want to we can override that and add additional settings after that. So that's it. That's all I've got for the basic setup of Tag Manager. One of the important things to remember is when you are previewing, you do need to refresh once you've made any changes here in your tag configuration, and then you also need to submit those changes to the site before they actually kick in.
Oh, thank you, Gary. That was good. And you've recorded it all.
We've recorded it all. So good, we've lost everybody.
No. We've still got everybody here. Although we are going to be testing Tim in a minute because he was definitely on the phone.
He's been on the phone the whole time. Brilliant.
I do have a question about this, Gary, and maybe this could be something that we need to talk about after, but one of the big issues that I have with analytics is with PayPal Express, in that it creates a user, guest user checkout, so it doesn't actually create the user. And when they come back around, that user's information isn't tracked. So if somebody goes to the checkout, for instance, we can track if they've paid with regular PayPal or with Amazon or credit cards, but PayPal Express is not tracked through that, or Facebook Pixel or any of those. Is there a way that we can set it up with analytics to be able to somehow track the PayPal Express transactions like it does everything else?
So one of the things that you might be able to do there, Adam, is if you can get hold of the PayPal transaction ID and pass that through to a session, perhaps,
Okay.
or a cookie, and then pick that cookie up and feed that into the data layer. It sounds like it's something to do with like a page transition where you're losing certain data and it's not being passed through to the data layer. So it's definitely something that could be.
What it basically does is it takes the whatever's in the cart, it then takes them, while they're in the cart, it takes them to PayPal, and while they're on with PayPal, they log in, they enter their information, but all the information is actually in PayPal until the very end, when it then pushes it into the database. But that process doesn't go through the browser, and so therefore it stops tracking the moment they go into the PayPal Express window.
Yeah. So what you could do is you could track the value of the purchase right the way up to when you present it to PayPal, and then you could track the confirmation when they do a return, and use that as your closing of the commerce tracking. So as long as you had all of the e-commerce data in the data layer, when you present it to PayPal, you could store that information, and then when PayPal confirm, you could then close that confirmation and pass that through in the data layer. So you
right.
wouldn't be able to know what was going on in PayPal unless there's a way to configure Tag Manager to be present in that process. I don't know if there is. I've never used PayPal and Tag Manager, but you could, as long as you had the tracking all the data information from the e-commerce transaction before you pass it on to PayPal, and then once PayPal sent back confirmed, then you would have the information and you could pass that through to analytics.
Okay, I'll work on that. And
there's a couple of things that might help you with that, Adam. First of all, I don't know,
Okay.
you've probably seen the various elements that you can install into Chrome to help you analyze analytics. So you've got the analytics. Am I still presenting? Can you still see my screen?
yes.
So
Yes.
you've got the analytics extension here.
Right, I have that already, yeah.
Okay, so you've also got Google Analytics GTM GA debug extension that can help. And then the one that I use mostly is this one here, the Google Analytics debugger. And what that does is in your Chrome developer tools, it adds in an extra tab at the end and allows you to see all of what's going on while you're tracking activity.
So I could see what information it's actually tracking right before they go to the PayPal Express,
Right.
and then I just have to figure out how to bring it back in.
Well, yeah, all you need to do then is pick up the activity from the Google callback, from the PayPal callback, and have that trigger your push into Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager. So
All right,
what you
so when
might
I get
need
to the final confirmation page, that's what would complete the loop.
Yeah, and what you might need to do at that point, if there's nothing actually creating that push, is that you might need to insert some JavaScript on that page, that return page, which takes your data layer information that you might have stored in a session or a cookie, and then feeds that back into the data layer, and pushes it out through to Tag Manager. So
Yeah,
that would
'cause, I
essentially
can also
be
add
done in
that to the
JavaScript.
URL and then just use the.
It would just be a bit of JavaScript code on that page, on your thank you page back on your website.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, that's it.